Here's a little movie about a clinical review of the quantum quality control, QQC, or the electronic tongue, as we like to call it. This machinery that we've been using for decades has been developed as an electronic tongue so that we could measure the electrical shape of a substance, just like your tongue does and feeds it to the brain, but we could measure that shape and be able to send it to a patient so we could see electrical reactivity. The tongue is how we do this in nature, how we can sense our foods. And extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. The World Health Products Rating System has a really rigorous ability to evaluate that validity. And before you speak, you got to make sure your tongue's connected. We're talking about the tongue. So I wanted to get through to this and tell you, you see that atoms have electrons on the outside and they repel each other so that no atom touches another. There's great distances between them. And the body is energetic. It's filled with energetic fields. You see, you can't even touch the chair you're sitting in. And that light from the sun comes into plants, and then it gives high energy states into the carbohydrates, which then we take in and release heat. You see, everything is an energy exchange, and the tongue has 8,000 taste buds. They're replaced every 2 weeks or so. Now, there are microscopic hairs which act as a voltammetry detector, and the Nobel Prize in Medicine 2004 was awarded to finding out more research about this olfactory system. In fact, most of the genome, the human genome, is dedicated to this shape receptor in the nose and taste. One of the ladies from the 2004 Nobel Prize. And you see this little, at the top, the little hair cells act as a voltammetry detector. Here's a microscopic view of a taste bud. And how this works is it takes in these flavors, etc., and sorts out and feeds that into the brain. So the tongue is there to help trigger the brain so that we know what is coming in and how to digest it. This is a very sophisticated procedure, and that most of the human genome is dedicated to this more than any other part of the entire body, more than any other senses. And the sharks have an electrical sense, but it turns out that we all have an electrical sense. The sharks live in salt water, so it's conductive. And I've written several books on this if you want to learn out more about the electrosense. But even vertebrates and humans have this electrosense. It's been converted into our olfactory system. Everybody does have an electrosense. But in mammals, it's a little more weak than in fish living in salt water. But if you can read the books, you'll find out more. But these taste buds and shape receptors do not absorb things. They just simply catch the shape and feed it electrically to the brain. Now, inside the tongue, we have these different areas, and I tried to make an electronic tongue. See, I tried to make a tongue that would be electronic, that would be able to tell the different shapes and store those shapes so that we could feed them back electronically. An electronic nose and electronic tongue. John Edward Burrow Randalls helped build the initial work on voltammetry. Some of the simple ideas of being able to measure the electrical shape of items. This is electrochemistry. And there's been many books written on voltammetry, electrochemistry, including brain functions and brain systems. But the system that was most guided for me was voltammetric determination of molecules of biological significance. Way back working in Las Vegas, I had found this book and uncovered a way that we could measure the electrical shape of biological items with an electronic tongue. Now, this was written and stored into the book on voltammetry to get the basic idea.
In the 5th grade, we learned that our bodies are made of atoms, and atoms are made mostly of protons, neutrons, and electrons. There are great spaces between these electrons and protons and other atoms. The electrons and atoms of our complex fractal body obey quantum, QED, photonic, electronic magnetic static laws. This is a mouthful, so we abbreviate, and since these are all energy, let's say energetic. The atoms in our body do not touch, but are held by energetic forces. We are taught in 7th grade the Mendeleev table of elements and how atoms seek to have certain amount of electrons in their outer shell. This is the basis of all chemistry, that there is a quantic rule how many electrons atoms want in their outer shell. Atoms combine to try to get a balanced outer electron number of electrons. This is a quantic force and a powerful force of nature. Atoms seek this balance and they move and combine to achieve it. Atoms are drawn together to make molecules, but still the outer electrons do not touch. We are shown rods and balls to display this, but there are no rods and there are no balls. There are just energy forces. These forces are electromagnetic, static, and quantic. Since the electrons and protons are so small, they make up less than 1% of 1% of 1% of 1%, 1% of 1% of 1%, 1%, 1% of 1% of the space in the body. So there is more than 99.999 infinite 9% empty space. This space is filled with energetic fields. We are made of energy fields. There are about 10 to the 30th electrons in the human body, more than all of the grains of sand multiplied by all the stars in the sky. This should make us humble, and we should now understand the risks of synthetic chemistry. So everything is energetic. Testosterone is like all of the others, an energetic hormone. Electrochemistry is the study of interchange of chemical and electrical energy. Since all things are energetic, electrochemistry is more important than ever. Voltammetry is an electrochemistry technique where amperage is studied as a response to voltage, used for the detection of minute quantities of chemicals by looking for their electrochemistry signatures. All compounds, and thus all hormones, have an electronic electrochemical signature. This is how a cell recognizes the hormone. The shape receptors on a cell recognize the energy field of the hormone and let it do its job. Desiree developed a sophisticated electrochemistry voltammetry device to measure a complex three-dimensional trivector electrochemistry signature of a substance. This patented device is called the QQC.
In the International Journal of the Medical Science of Homeopathy and Naturopathy, which has an ISSN number as a peer-reviewed medical journal, here we were able to publish the initial research that we had accumulated over years, 1997, but we had started this research way back in the 80s, some even in the 70s. And through this analysis, we were able to show and lay the basic groundwork of our clinical review. So we're talking about decades of research that have led into this clinical review of the electronic tongue, which we called quantum quality control, QQC. All these different little studies were able to show, and because of this work, I was nominated for the Nobel Prize for many years. I had lectured at the Nobel Prize Hospital, 2000, and in 1992, we did a 3-day lecture at the Royal Society of Medicine in London, England. Here we see some of the initial work with the system that we had developed, a voltammetric system that was able to take a homeopathic, you see, and this led to a patent that we made in 2007. That's when it was submitted. It's been approved. And we were able to measure the voltammetric electronic signature of items. In other words, we were making an electronic tongue. As years have gone by, we've now tried to broaden it so that we can do sweet, sour, bitter, and all of those with just one function, like our tongue does. But this would need an increased electrode, which now we are using 12 different electrodes. Here's some of the short positive results that have been in the QQC review. Is that we had a review of professionals in the field who reviewed the technology and wrote about it, part of our clinical evaluation. This has been published in a book if you'd like to be able to see this and take your time to read it. Write to us at the below website and we can send it to you. You see, this electronic tongue technology was developed to be able to do medication testing to see which enzyme, hormone, vitamin, other different factors that people would react to. And when we were able to do this in an electronic way, we found that we could measure these items and then see patients' reactions. We started selling these items in the EPFX, electrophysiological feedback system, established with an FDA registration in 1989, was when we actually started to evaluate. And as we can see from the 510K registration, this form of electrical physiological reactivity was included in that original 510K. It now has been registered throughout the world, as it now has been registered throughout the world as transcutaneous voltammetric evoked potential. This is how we can send in the signal of an item that's been captured by the QQC, electronic tongue, and then see how a patient reacts to it, charting out those reactions to see just which type of allergy compound, bacteria, fungus, virus, or other different things. And you can get into this book, the voltammetry research, to understand more. We got our first EC Declaration of Conformity, our first CE mark, back in the 90s. And here's some of the other people researching around the world in electronic tongue. We can see that now this has expanded into becoming a very large form of research done around the world. Not just our research, but research done by a host of other researchers, validating and establishing the clinical evaluation of this technology, this voltammetry measure technology, and then voltammetry reactivity technology. If you'd like to see the clinical review of the eclosion SCIO and that type of work, simply write us and we will be able to show you that rather extensive clinical review. We found that we could be able to capture things like testosterone and send that electrical energy into the body and get results. You see, for food analysis, the electronic tongues have been used for food analysis. They've been used to analyze wine, coffee, a host of different things, as the internet is full of articles on voltammetry and the voltammetry of testosterone. We found that we could actually hormone stream and send in the signal of testosterone and get results. And we were able to measure these results and publish these results in peer-reviewed medical journals. Here we see more. Here's an electronic tongue used for honey classification. Collagen. And the carbon paste electrodes, what we found was able to measure electrons coming in or out equally because of the atomic structure of carbon. Now, we've written books about this in much more extensive form. Today, this is just a review of the clinical evaluation, a rather short review of the extensive research. I'm sorry that it does take about 20 minutes to present all this material. But if you want to know more about this technology, you can write to us. We can pass on to the books. We've been able to show the idea of an electrochemistry is the chemistry. All chemistry really is electrochemistry. And the forces that hold everything together are energetic and electrical in part of their nature. Now, to understand the TVEP, the transcutaneous voltammetric evoked potential, we could see that we are measuring what is holding the forces together. And we printed about this in this book, The Science of Medication Testing, TVEP. And in its clinical form, or clinical review, is this book, TVEP, The Clinical Experience. So you can get a big idea of what we've done, is that we do believe in evidence. This evidence led to our Class 1 registration, the electronic tongue, and this is the type of data we get from an evaluation. We're going to get over 10,000 bits of data as we analyze the pattern, the three-dimensional pattern of an item. This gives us an idea of its shape. Here's the shape of an estrogen compound. So we see that its shape, its electrical energy at different factors, this is done through a very complicated QQC electronic tongue voltammetry process, and it has been evaluated clinically as being valid and helping patients. The host of different research blended together. The European registration of the device using the TVEP and EPR. There's an American registration as well. And here's one of the secondary steps, because now we've even gone beyond this one. This type of process of using this voltammetry is now able to study the electrical reactivity of fields, finding that field and then being able to send it into the body for therapy or for reactivity studies. 4 decades of research have gone into making and determining this trivector state. So there's a host of different research, because extraordinary claims need extraordinary research. As some of our doctors have said, how amazingly accurate it is. One doctor in South Africa was able to write this paper. It's an amazing accuracy. Some people said spooky accuracy. The quantum quality control, trademarked and patented, has been able to find a way so that we can measure these different reactivity items. And now today, having renewed our declaration of conformity for the CE mark of the electronic tongue from the Eclosion Corporation. So what I've showed you today is a brief review of the literature. You might want to look more. And if you look on World Health Products Rating Service, you'll see that we have completely provided evidence, evidence-based medicine, validation and verification, because validation and verification of your claims, this is the law. Peer-reviewed medical journal, taught in medical universities, even taught by governments, government stamps, the QEC. And this is Professor Desiree Dubonnet, Doctorate in International Law. If you have questions, please talk to us so that we can respond to them intelligently. Thank you.